Hi everyone. So today I'm just gonna go through the steps to set up a CI/CD for GCP to run your application on App Engine through Cloud Build. So first of all, I've just cloned my repo to my notebook locally. You can see I checked out to the GCP CI/CD branch. So we have a directory called API and web. So the API is obviously where the API is stored, and the web is where the Angular web app is stored. So first thing you can do is you can create a new directory, call it CI or anything that makes sense to you. So in that directory we're just going to add a couple of new directories as well as files. So you can add the files. So GCP needs a Cloud Build file to run Cloud Build builds. So we can just create a cloudbuild.web.yaml file. So that's going to be used for the web. New one. So for this application, it's only for web and API. You can also, if you want to add a database, you can do that as well. There should be documentation in Google how to migrate your database using Cloud Build. So we're also going to add a cloudbuild.api.yaml. So this is going to be used for the API. Now I can just add a new directory for the web as well as for the API. So for this we're going to add a file called app.yaml. So this will be used, Google used this to pull through the server configuration. So I'll show you this a little bit later step. You can set up automatic scaling, the server's name, instance class, that type of stuff. So in this directory API, I'm just gonna add app. Let's just use testing. So the testing is just used for environment variables. So this is also going to be pulled through GCP. So you just need to make sure. Normally I'll use staging or production, but for this I'm just going to use testing. Same for the web. Add a file app.testing.yaml. Okay, so first of all we're just going to create this. Let me show you how this looks. You can specify the runtime. For this Node API, I'm going to use Node.js 12, and environment you can specify if it needs to be a standard or flexible app engine. Because this is going to be a staging, you're going to use standard. Flexible is a bit more expensive, but yeah, standard should work with any type of server that you want to bring up. But yeah, that you can just find in the documentation just to read a bit more about that. Instance class, so we're gonna just use a F1. This is the smallest one for standard, just because this is a testing environment. I'm creating servers. This is gonna be the name of the service that's gonna be deployed. So I'm using default API, and you can enter like automatic scaling. There's a couple of options for this. I'm not going to go through all of them. Yeah, let's just make a max instance of 1. So the maximum instances that's going to run on GCP, it's going to be 1. So this is because it's just a testing environment. So I'm not going to do anything fancy there. Network. Just going to set the session affinity through. So it's this spelling mistake. So yeah, this is the only configuration I'm going to do for the API. So if you want to make more changes, you can just follow GCP's document and you'll see there's a lot of configurations that you can do in this file, and everything's getting pulled through to App Engine. So if you want to make a change to a service, you can just do it here, and the size, runtime, environment, everything you can do here. So the same we're going to do for the web, but this one is going to be a bit different because it has images and all of those things it needs to pull through with the deployment. So runtime, again, I'm going to use Python 27. API version, this is because we're using Python 27, it's only able to use API version number 1, so that's the reason I'm just entering that. Thread safe, set to yes. Service. On GCP you'll see normally the first service that you're going to deploy, it needs to be named default, otherwise it's not gonna deploy. So that's why I'm gonna deploy the web first, so that's why I named it default. So you just need to make a note about that. Default duration, just gonna set that to 60 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to go to handlers. This is what's different between the web and the API's handlers. This is all the files and images it needs to pull through, so you'll have to include the path to that files in the build phase. So this one, let me just, the URL is going to be assets, first one. And you need to include a static there. This is, for me, it's going to be at IST radio list assets secure. You can always make it secure, so just set this to always. So that will be the first one. Okay, and then you can just go through all of your files and just check which ones needs to be added. For me, it's going to be, another one is going to be URL. It's going to be, so for this, you'll just use a dot, all of these files. So I'm just going to say all of my CSS files, so it needs to be included. Static files, you need to add this, otherwise it's not going to get pulled through and your web app is going to be blank. So still same as we did before, radio list one. So that is very important, the static files, so you need to make sure about that path. So rather be double sure than for you to be struggling the whole time not knowing why your web app isn't showing anything. So upload is also going to be the same, radio list, all of the files that needs to be included. Dot CSS. Okay, secure always. So everything is going to be like that, so I'm just going to make a copy of this one just to prevent any misspelling of anything. Just gonna add a couple. Check now how many I do need. So the next file I'll be using is HTML. Still radio. This one is gonna be the same still. So you can just change it here. So and you can just add all of your files. Okay. So to add a JS, lastly a text. And then just make a note here, it's going to be the site root. And the URL is only going to be a slash store radio list. Here you can just add index.html. So that's going to be my root. Same for this one. Just add index.html. Always secure. Just add another one to catch all the rules responsible for handling Angular applications. So this is what this one's going to be used for. URL is going to be this, also index.html. Index.html always, and then lastly you can just add a skip files. And then I can't seem to find my question mark. Just gonna copy this. Okay, so if anything, path isn't right, so then it's gonna skip that file. So that's why you'll be left with the blank web app. So you just need to make sure about all of these paths. And yeah, these are just the configurations of GCP. Let's just add a note here. Okay, let's just go through them again. So the first one is going to be assets. Second one is HTML files that it needs to be included. ICO files, JS files, text files, and then you need to specify the site's root. So mine is index.html, and this one is to catch all rules responsible for handling Angular application. So it's also index, and then it just skips these files. So the two app.yaml files is now created, this one for the API, this one for the web. Now we're just going to move on to the physical steps that CloudBuild's going to use to build your application. So depending on your package JSON scripts, yours may vary from mine. I don't have any testing, so because it's an example. So for the API, I'm just going to use steps. Let's make this install all node packages. Okay, you can just add an ID for the unique ID. You can name it what you want. For me, I'm going to use API and I'm gonna run npm install on it. So that's just to make it easier for me to follow the steps when the build process begins. So the next one is you'll need to add a directory where you're going to be working in. So this for me is going to be API, because my API is stored in the API directory. This is also depending on how your project is set up. So the next one is name. Here you can specify the node version that you want to use, or the cloud builder that you want to use. You'll see in the next step I'm going to use a cloud builder, but for this one I'm going to be using Node 10.16.3. I'm using version 10.16.3 because I had issues with 16. It didn't allow me to install TSG or use TSC. So here you can just add an entry point. For this example we're going to use npn because we want to run npn commands. Arguments. Yeah, if you have any testing in your package.json script you can use it. Like I said, for me I'm not going to use it now. I'm just going to start with the npm install to install all the packages. So you can change it depending on your project. So this is just the arguments that npm needs to run. And lastly we're just going to add a wait for, because this is the first step. I'm just using this, so it's not going to wait for any other step, and that's the way you can specify for Google which steps it needs to run first, because like npm build and deploy depends on npm install, so that steps will need to wait for this one. So the next one you'll see, I'm going to use Google's GSUtil to copy over this app.yaml file to the server so that it knows what configuration it needs to be set up. So this is what this step is going to do. So I'm just going to name it API app YAML. So again, you can use any wording that you like, just something that makes sense, because if the steps fail you can go back and check the history and say, okay, it failed on this step, so you know where it went wrong. So for this one I'm going to use Cloud Builders GSUtil. So this is used by Google too. I think it's a Python application that you can access Google storage. So that's what this tool is. So I'm just specifying for Google to use it. Next one, I'm gonna run an argument. So I'm gonna run cp copy. So what files do I want to copy? I want to copy in my repo in the CI directory API app dot this. So this is now an environment variable. It's a substitute variable that Google uses. So when I'm going to set up the triggers, I'll just refer back to this. So this is where that app.testing comes in. You can make it production, anything you want. So that testing I'm going to specify on the trigger in GCP itself to be testing. So when this one runs, it's going to pull through the testing.yaml file. So you can add a production, and then if that trigger runs with the production environment file, it's going to use the specific app.yaml file that has that same environment variable in it. So that's what this is for. So I'm just specifying it needs to copy this file over to the new directory, which is going to be API app.environment.yaml. So that is the only arguments that you're going to run. The first one, copy that specific file, the path in your repo, to the new path on the server. So just going to use wait for. This also, it does not depend on any other steps, so we're going to use the same as we did before. The next one, we're going to do npm run build, so API build step. The directory we're working in is still the API. Name is still node 10.16.3. Entry point, we're going to use npm again. Arguments, again depending on your JSON, but normally it will only be a build, so its arguments that we're going to run is run build. You can just separate them with the comma. So that's the only arguments we're going to run for the API build. This one we'll have to add a wait for, so it needs to wait. Then you can just specify the name of the step it needs to wait for. So for me it's going to be API npm install. So this is just a reference from this ID here. So it just needs to wait for npm install before it can build. So the last step we're going to do npm deploy. Not npm deploy, just GCP deploy. Directory, still the API. Name. So for this one we're going to use this builder. I'll just show you now. Out builders, and all of these builders and information can be found in Google's documentation, so you can just have a look if you're unsure. So it will use gcloud to deploy the application, so that's what we're going to use. Wait for. This one needs the API build before it can deploy, so we're just going to specify wait for API build to finish, and then the arguments, this is quite going to be a long argument. So it uses the gcloud. We're just going to gcloud app. Deploy. And it uses that file that we copied over, so just going to specify that file again. Dot environment.yaml. Okay, the next one I'm going to use a version, but for now I'm just going to use. So if you want to use a version, you need to do it like this. I'm going to use version number 1, so that's going to be displayed in App Engine itself. So when you deploy, you can change it to version 2, so you're going to have 2 versions up. You can migrate the traffic as you like. But yeah, later in this video I'll just show you how to use tagging on GitHub to pull through to GCP and replace that version with the tag on GitHub. So that works quite well. It's nice to use and easy to see which release is up and running. So after we're done with this one, I'm just going to show you quick how that works. So this is, it's going to be the gcloud arguments app deploy that specific file that we copied over. Version is going to be number 1. No promote. This is just used to not promote, so it's going to use a different URL. If you promote this, it's going to, yeah, I'll just show you later in the build steps. It's easier to show you then. Okay, so the API cloud build file is finished. If you want to just check again, this is going to be API npm install. Just runs npm install. Second step just copies over that file to this location. The next one is just run a npm build and then gcloud app deploy that file, that version, no promote. So it's quite straightforward. Just get this new one. So the last one that we're going to add is the cloud.web.yaml. So it's almost going to be the same as the API. Let's actually just take this over just to make it a bit more quicker. So the difference is going to be, where all of this is API, I'm just going to use web. Directory is going to be web. Node, I'm going to use a newer version, 13.1. Also, firstly, going to do an npm install. Just going to change to web. This, it also gets that file then from the web and not the API directory. It's going to save it to the new web directory. For the build, we're just going to use web. It's going to go into that directory, the web directory. Node version is going to be 16.13.1. npm run build, wait for the web npm install. Deployment is going to be web deploy. Directory is the web directory. We're just going to use web build, so it needs to wait for the web build to finish before it's going to deploy. Same for this, we're going to use app deploy that file version number 1, also no promote. So yeah, that's it for the files that you need on your repo. So let's just save them. Okay, so your repo will look like this now. It has a CI directory in it, API and web directory in that. It's just to organize it a bit. You can leave all the files where you want to, but yeah, this is just to organize it. Cloud.build.api, cloud.build.web. The web has the app testing.yaml and the API as well. Differs a bit, but yeah, it's the same concept. So okay, we can just commit these. Just gonna stage them. Just add CI/CD files. I'm gonna sync it. Okay. Now it's time for the GCP setup. So I have already created a Tech Tuesday project, so you can just create a new one, name it what you want. The first thing you'll need to do, you can just search for App Engine and Cloud Build. You can also just get it from the dashboard. So there you will be automatically redirected to enable the APIs for that services. So I've already done that. So you can just search for App Engine and Cloud Bolt and just enable that. The next step will be also, you can just go to APIs and services. There's one API that you also need to have for the build process to be successful. So just search for App Engine, the App Engine Admin API. So if that API is not enabled, it will also just fail. So again, you can just navigate to IAM permissions. You'll see you'll have a Cloud Bolt service account. When you enable that API, it automatically creates the service accounts. This is the App Engine service accounts. You can just add these specific roles to each of them. The App Engine Admin, Cloud Bolt service account, and this one has an editor automatically assigned, and this one has the service account automatically assigned. So just add the rest. So let's just navigate to Cloud Bolt. Just show you the triggers. I already set up 2 triggers, but I'll just go through them. So I have a web and API deploy trigger. I'm just going to edit them to show you what you'll need to add. Just the name, you can specify any name, description, again specify any description. We're first going to use a push to branch. You'll have to connect to a new repository, just authenticate your personal or organization repository to be able to access that repo. I'm just going to use the main branch, so every time we push to the main branch it's going to invoke this trigger. These will be hidden, so you can just click on show. Included files will be the CI folder in your repo. That's all the files we created earlier that GCP needs to run the build and deployment. And for this trigger we'll also be working in the web directory. The ignore files, I just added a readme file here, so this you can add any file that you don't that the trigger won't invoke on. So if there's any changes on the readme, it won't run this trigger. So you can add anything you want, like git ignore or anything else. We're going to use a Cloud Bolt configuration file. It's located in our repository. The path to that file will be the directory that you made. For me it's CI, then it's the cloudbolt.web1 that we're going to use for this trigger. The environment variable is the one that I talked about earlier. That's the app.testing.yaml file. So there we can create a couple like production or staging, and you can modify their configurations as you like. So production will be obviously in a bigger server with more automatic scaling configurations in it. So here it will pick up which file it needs to use. For this one we're going to be using testing, so it will take that file and deploy that specific server to this service. So we can just click on save. The API is going to be the same, it's just going to have a different name, different description. Also push to branch, you can just click your repository. We're going to use the main branch as well. There's also the CI folder is going to be included, as well as the API folder. We're going to select Cloud Bolt configuration file. The location, this one is just going to be the cloudbolt.api.yaml file. Environment is also going to be the testing. So we can click on save. Remember, if it's the first time you're deploying, you'll have to deploy the one that's going to be named default. So for this purpose, it doesn't matter which one I'm going to run, because I already deployed a couple. But if it's your first time, for me, as I showed you, we named the web service default. So in this case we're going to run the web trigger first. You'll have to wait for it to finish, and then you'll have to run the API one. Otherwise it's not going to be successful. But for this example, like I said, I already deployed, so it doesn't matter. You can go to history. There's a couple, you'll see there's a couple that failed, but that was syntax error that I made earlier. So you can just go into the history and see the whole process running. It will give you a good description as well if something fails and tell you why it failed, where you must go and look. So yeah, all the steps that you created, remember we created the npm install for the web. This one was used to copy that file over to the server, web build, and lastly the web deploy. So it will show you which step it is and yeah, what's happening, so you can just monitor this. But if everything is set up correctly, it will succeed, so you don't have to worry a lot about that. So this one you'll see is already at API deploy, so it's already busy deploying. So normally for the API it doesn't take too long. I think it's below 2 minutes. Okay, API is done. And the web should take a bit longer, but yeah, it's also not too bad. It's like 3 months, depending on how big your application is. For this one, it's quite small, so it won't take too long. So here you can see the target project. This is the project that we're using, the Tuesday one that I created. This is the service name that I talked about. First one you need to deploy needs to be default, that's why the web is named default. Target version, I just used number 2, so that's just gonna display on App Engine side. Yeah, and then you can get the URL as well. So this one is also finished. Just move over to App Engine so I can show you guys. Earlier I also deployed with the tag release I talked about, but I'll show you now how that works. So you can go to the version, this is the web version. So currently, earlier version, this is the new one I just released. So we can actually just migrate the traffic to this one. So the new version is serving the traffic, the same for the API. I'm gonna migrate the traffic to the new version. Okay, so now we can just check if it's running. API is okay. Default one. So okay. Okay, great. So there you can see everything is live. So let's see if we have time to just go through that tagging process. Just git fetch, just get the latest. Okay, so this is the ones that we worked on. I'm just going to change it a bit. The only thing you need to change for this will be the deployment step. So this one we're just going to remove. I'm just going to add. So this is for bash scripts. So C. This one is just to write everything in a line. Then we're going to declare a variable. Version that GCP is going to use is the tag name, and this is a substitute variable that you can get from GitHub. So GCP allows you to get a couple of substitute variables straight from GitHub. So this will get the tag name, you can just use gcloud app deploy app dot the environment is testing, so it will get that also from GCP YAML. So here we say, remember the one before we just said version is equal to a number 1 or number 2, so yeah, we're going to specify it a bit different. It's equal to we're going to say version. This replaces a dot with the hyphen, so that is what that command is for. The reason for that is because GCP doesn't allow you to have a dot in your version, so you need to do this if you're using a tag release with a dot. So no promote. Entry point, we're going to use bash. Make sure everything is okay. Tag name. Yeah, so that looks fine. We're going to do the same for the web CloudBolt file. So I'm just going to copy this over. Just delete this. Paste. Okay, so this one is going to do the same. And we'll just save the changes. Stage them and commit them. And tagging release. Okay. Just check here if it is updated. Okay, so that's fine. And it's also fine. So now we're just gonna go on creating the tag release. So you'll see I already created 2 beforehand. That's the one that's live on the server, but it doesn't serve any traffic. So just click on release, draft a new release. Let's create 1.0.2 from main. Let's just name it version 1.0.2. Publish release. Okay, so now this release is showing on your GitHub. There it goes, just needs to be refreshed. Then all you have to do is go to CloudBolt. We're just going to edit the triggers a bit, just so that it doesn't invoke the trigger on a push to branch, but rather push on new tag. So I'm going to edit this one. I'm going to just say push to new tag. I'm going to select any tag and save. Same for the API, edit, push to new tag, any tag, click on save. And now if you run it, you'll see all the tags. You can select the one that you want to deploy. We're going to deploy the latest one. Same for the API, latest one. So this is normally used in a production environment where you run the triggers manually. So when a new release tag is up, you can just manually trigger that you created. So just check the history. The API should finish first, so let's just go to him. You can see the execution details here, so it's going to use bash. It gets that version, and then it goes to the gcloud app deployment command. That version gets the dots gets replaced with hyphens. So that's the whole step for that. So let's see if it builds successfully. Just wait for it to finish. So you'll see the target version is now not only 1, it's that tag that we specified. It's 1-0-2. Okay, so the API finished. Let's quickly just show you how that looks. You can just go back to App Engine. Now when you click on versions, you select the API service and you'll see the new version is there. You can migrate the traffic if you want to release it, but for this one I'm just going to leave it as is. So that helps a lot with seeing which version is currently serving traffic. So yeah, it pulls it through from GitHub, so we can see everything here. Check on the web build. So it finished. Go back to App Engine, versions. Default one also has the new version now. You can just click there, migrate, and migrate the traffic if you want to migrate it to the new version. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to just leave a comment. I'll just go through them if I get a chance. Probably later in the year I'll just do another video just showing you guys how to migrate the DB as well. For now this should be okay. Yeah, and we can go a bit more in detail about the configurations and setting up automatic scaling to a certain point that it will be ideal for your services not to go offline. So, but for now this one should be fine. You can see all the details here that you can change, but yeah, I'll talk about that in a later stage. Thank you so much for joining. Hope it was a helpful video. Hope you can learn about something. Like I said, leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.